Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jill Ferris, and I'm the Senior Director of Engagement, Learning, and Interpretation at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. I am excited to be with you this afternoon to talk a bit about an upcoming exhibition that we have planned called the Changing Chesapeake, which is CBMM's first community response exhibition. I'm joined today by Chief Curator Pete Lesher and Curator of Collections, Jen Doldy. And we're going to walk through the exhibition and introduce the concept to you, talk a little bit about the call for submissions that is open right now. And then we'll end our conversation this afternoon by looking at some examples and hopefully some inspiration to think about what you could submit for the Changing Chesapeake exhibition. So again, here's our agenda that we'll go through this afternoon. We'll talk about what Changing Chesapeake is, how to participate, guidelines in our selection process, and then ideas for submissions. If you have questions throughout this webinar, I'd encourage you to put them in the chat, or you can use the Q&A feature, and we'll address questions as we go. So the Changing Chesapeake is a very new idea for us, but I think really rooted in the essence of who we are at CBMM. We talk about the Chesapeake as a place that is really rooted in tradition, but also a place of incredible change, and how the history is really connected through culture and has really important ties to the environment. So in this community response exhibitions, we are looking for submissions that reflect those aspects of the Chesapeake Bay. We're looking for artwork and other cultural examples of work that is reflective of the Chesapeake Bay, that responds to observations from the landscape or from the community surrounding those of us who are living here in the Chesapeake. We're looking for a variety of different media, and we'll talk more about that later on in this webinar. And we're also looking to represent the diversity of community perspectives. We are certainly not a monolith, and we want to make sure that this exhibition is as representative of the differences in lived experiences here as possible. So with the call for submissions, we have a few questions that we're asking our artists and community members to consider in the submission of their artwork. So how is climate change or the impact of humans on the environment shaping your Chesapeake community? How is the way you've identified with or inspired by the Chesapeake evolved or changed over time? What would you want someone 100 years from now to know about your life and community traditions today? And what is your vision for the future of life in the Chesapeake region? Your submission could answer one or more than one of those questions. And the guiding questions are really there to help think about and frame your submission so that there can be a cohesive narrative within the exhibition itself. I could see a lot of opportunities to reflect on the relationship with the environment. And so that may be the relationship with the changing environment and climate change. It could also be reflecting on community traditions or family traditions. And there's a lot of room within these questions for those of us who have come to the Chesapeake region, found a new home here, whether we've only been here for a short period of time, or those of us who are deeply rooted through longstanding family ties to the region. It doesn't matter the length of time of your relationship with the Chesapeake, we're trying to capture the diversity of those perspectives. So
I was just going to add, Jill, I think that these questions can be a little challenging. And really, I think what we're asking people to do is to, we know that the Chesapeake is a source of inspiration and personal identity. We're asking you, as you create your artwork, whatever it may be, to think a little more deeply about that and say, why does this particular aspect of culture inspire me so much? Why is this change meaningful, concerning, hopeful for me, whatever it may be? And just to think a little more fully, because that is the stuff which we are going to associate with your artwork and put into the exhibition, that will add a lot more dimension to you and give voice to what people are thinking and feeling.
And we'll talk a little bit in just a moment about the submission process and where those questions really come into being. So you may have artwork that is related to these questions. And then we are also asking for an artist statement, which gives you the space to put words to your answer. So if you look at your artwork and feel that the words and the connection to the questions are maybe not explicit or clear, you have a space to still submit that artwork that you feel really answers these questions, and then describe that connection. Because sometimes artwork is subjective and it is in the eyes of the viewer, and we want to be able to make that connection and go on that journey with you. So who is this call for submissions available to? And the answer is you and your neighbor. It is open to everyone, artists of any age, with no residency requirements and no cost to participate. We want to hear from as many people as possible in the Chesapeake Bay region. And so we've intentionally kept this very broad and very open. If you are watching this, we want to hear your perspective, and we want to hear the perspectives of your family and your friends who also are in this area. So the unifying feature is our connection to the geography. So the artwork should have a connection to the Chesapeake, but you as an artist do not have to live here or be from here. So it is still very open within that. We also want to make sure that we are accepting submissions, including from people for whom English may not be their preferred language. So if you are an artist and you would rather submit your art in another language, we are also very excited to receive your submission. I mentioned that we are seeking submissions in a variety of media. We are considering media that can be exhibited indoors. So we have a number of examples that are here. There are a few limitations. Please do not submit anything that would be considered hazardous materials or unstable live media like food or I'm just going to say unstable live media instead of describing what that is. If you have questions about it, we're happy to answer further. Bodily fluids, anything like that. It needs to be something that can be on exhibition for a number of months consecutively. But that still leaves this very open. So we'll talk more about different ideas and opportunities, hopefully inspire you. And our guidelines, which are available, we'll post the link in just a moment, outline a number of those options as well. Please note that many of these are visual media, but we are also open to performing arts and literary arts and digital arts. So this can be as broad and wide-ranging as possible. This is not just a call for paintings or photography, though those are both welcomed as well. We do have some size limitations because we do not have an infinite amount of space to hang all of the artwork. So we are asking that any flat artwork be no larger than 30 inches by 30 inches in its ready to hang size, so including any framing. Three-dimensional artwork is welcomed, but again, we ask no larger than 30 inches by 30 inches by 30 inches. For literary work, a word limit of up to 500 words. For audiovisual and digital media, up to 5 minutes in length, and a weight limit of 25 pounds. That said, we know there are some really incredible artwork pieces that have been created and will be created, hopefully in connection with this exhibition. And so we are considering oversized pieces on a limited basis as space allows. So if you don't fit within those parameters, please still reach out and send in your submission, but know that to try and accommodate as much as we are able, we're trying to keep most of the artwork within those general size parameters. As I mentioned, we have these guidelines posted. I'll put the link in the chat. You can visit bit.ly/Changing Chesapeake for the guidelines that we went through, as well as the process of submitting a work. And that's what we're going to go through next. So when you visit bit.ly/Changing Chesapeake, you will find the link to our submission form, which is a digital submission form. There is some information that is required in order to send in your submission. So we need to know the artist's name. We need a contact email and a preferred phone number. We need to know the city and state of the artist, the artwork medium, and the dimensions. You can refer back to the guidelines, which are on the website as well, to make sure that they meet those requirements, and be prepared for your submission. We are only reviewing artworks virtually. So you're not sending in your completed artwork to us for review. You're sending in an image or a video or link to your artwork so that we can do the review instead of having all artwork come to us on site. If you are submitting a flat artwork or three-dimensional, then we're asking for JPEG images for our review. If you are submitting literary work, you can send it as a PDF document or a PDF. And if you are sending in something that is an audio, visual, digital submission, an MP3 or MP4 file, or a hyperlink to a website where you have it hosted. So if that's SoundCloud or YouTube, all of those will allow our reviewers to go through the review process. Again, you're not sending the artwork to us. We are going to do a community review, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. So artwork that is selected will then be requested to be sent to CBMM. Any artwork that is sent to us outside of those parameters may be discarded, and I don't want to see that happen to anybody's artwork. So please, virtual submissions only. As I mentioned, we're also asking for a brief artist statement. And this is where you get a chance, you have an opportunity to explain the connection between your artwork and the exhibition to help us better understand how your submission connects with those questions. So in that artist statement, we're asking for you to be explicit, to be clear about the connections. And we also want to give you the opportunity to express your artist statement in a format that fits best for you. So I expect that some people will be most comfortable submitting a written statement. We ask those be kept to a maximum of 150 words. If you are somebody that would prefer not to write and would rather record, you could take a cell phone video or an audio memo and send us an audio or video response, which we ask you limit to 2 minutes. Again, we encourage you to submit your artist statement in your preferred language. So if English is not your preferred language, then please send us your artist statement in the language that you are most comfortable in. How to submit. As I mentioned, our virtual form is accessible at bit.ly/Changing Chesapeake. Through that website, you can submit your artwork images, your artist statement, and any other files. And there are a few other options for how to get those to us. So through that form, you are able to copy and paste links in the text field on the form. You can also use this additional bit.ly link, which is linked through the form, to upload files to us. Or we have an email address, and you can send it to us at changingchesapeake@cbmm.org. We are working on a paper copy of the submission form, which I hope will be available this spring. So if that is something that would be more accessible to you, feel free to reach out and we can get that form to you when we have it ready. I think one of the pieces that I'm most excited about in this process, other than the vision that I have of what this exhibition will look like at the end, without knowing what is going to be in the exhibition, is the process of how we're getting to the end result. So instead of our curatorial process really relying on our staff team, we are casting a wider net. Our staff is going to work on pre-screening submissions for this exhibition, making sure that submissions connect to the themes, they reflect appropriate content, they meet size limitations and follow the other guidelines. But we are not making the final determination of what goes into the exhibition. Instead, we are planning to bring in a community panel to work with on selecting the artwork for the exhibition. We are expecting that that community panel will be looking at the emotional resonance and visual impact of artwork, the relationship to the exhibition themes as expressed in the artist statements, and the diversity of community perspectives in artistic media. If this sounds like something that you would be interested in participating in as one of our community panelists, we expect that we'll be soliciting those panelists later on in this summer of 2022. We're also planning for a blind review process unless the media format inhibits anonymity. So we're hoping to give our panelists a chance to really look and appreciate and enjoy the artwork that's submitted in the selection of what will make it into the exhibition. When we have selected artwork, we'll make the notification. The staff will make the notification. We ask that any artwork that is going to be in the exhibition come to CBMM ready to hang. So if it is flat artwork, it is already fitted out with the D-ring or sleeve or wire, cleat, whatever is necessary for wall mounting. And we also know that some of the works that are included, if they're three-dimensional or literary or digital media, our staff team will work with the artists to make sure that they're exhibited correctly. So our process for this, bringing in our community panel for the selection process, we expect to make exhibition notifications in the late fall, including directions for how to deliver artwork. So again, the only artwork that we expect to come to campus is the artwork selected for exhibition. No artwork should be sent to CBMM unless it is requested after the review process. And so those notifications will explain the directions about how to get artwork to us. And here's the timeline. So we are in this first submission stage right now. Our submissions are open through September 1st, 2022, which should give you a nice long window. I know that there are some artists who already have pieces that fit within these themes, and we've actually already been receiving submissions, which is very exciting. But I also know that there are some people who will create art especially for this exhibit, and there are some people who may not think of themselves as an artist first, but who want to take on this opportunity to express what's happening in their community. I encourage you to do all of that, and we purposely planned a very long window to give you a chance to work on those submissions. In September, we will start the process of staff review once the submission window closes, and we will work with the community panel through the fall and into the early winter of 2022 on the curation and selection process, bringing artwork on site December to January of 2023, with an anticipated opening for this exhibition in February of 2023. So we are about a year out from the opening of the Changing Chesapeake, and I am just so excited. I'm excited to see what the year brings. So I did see a question. Chelsea asked if we can submit more than one piece, and the answer is yes. We're not making that limitation for you. So if you have more than one piece that you think fits into the criteria and you would like to submit, then I would encourage that. Just know that we have limited space, and so every work that's submitted will likely not be accepted into the show. And so if you flood us with submissions, I will be excited to see all of your artwork, but you may create more competition for yourself. So I hope to see your art coming in, And I would just ask your thoughtful discretion in how much you submit to us. I mentioned that we have an email address for this exhibition. If you have questions, you can email us at changingchesapeake.cbmm.org, and we can connect with you. And that's also a way you can submit files to us. And now, the part of this program that I am most excited for, I call this Talking Art with Pete and Jen. As we've been planning for this exhibition, we've been thinking a lot about what we want to see, what we hope to see, what we hope you find inspiration in. And I am hoping to be surprised and excited, really seeing, I think my favorite piece of looking at an art exhibition is really getting inside the mind of the artist. And so I hope that you take that challenge and surprise us and wow us and let us see inside your experience. But as we've been talking about it, we've also been thinking about opportunities and connections and art that we already know exists to hopefully give you a little bit of inspiration into what you could contribute to this exhibition. So I'm going to pause for a minute and ask Jen, do you want to start us off and talk a little bit about visual art? Because I think that's a natural starting place when you're thinking about things to contribute to an exhibition.
Absolutely. So two very different examples here. On the left is an image of a ghost forest by Dave Harp, who was a former Baltimore Sun and Bay Journal photographer, whose work we just did a retrospective of in the last year. You know, Dave is somebody who teaches photography as well as being a skilled photographer and photojournalist. I think he would describe himself more as a documentarian. And he's a cinematographer as well. And one of the things he talks about a lot when he refers to his own work is really just about honing that art of observation. We all, you know, observe the world around us, and using a camera or some other medium to convey what we're observing around us is just one way to express it. And he will tell stories about how he'll do a workshop and everyone will take the same view, and the photographs come out quite differently. So that art of observation is essential. And he also talks about just being there. So, you know, for those of us who live in this region, you know, we see the landscape and the culture and the built environment around us on a daily basis. We see how it's changed, especially if you've lived most of your life here, or even if you have not. And so being there, seeing something every day, kind of taking it in and processing it and noting those differences and wanting to convey something about it is part of what is the artistic inspiration. And so that's what motivates Dave Harp, you know, skilled, wonderful photographer, but something that's accessible to everyone. And an example of that also perhaps on the right is this untitled portrait of a picker named Mary Ward. She worked at Lindy's Seafood down in Dorchester County and Hoopersville. And Joseph Keene himself was a crab picker who worked for Meredith and Meredith, among other companies. He had the skills, he saw these people, and then he later, or at the same time, went to work for Western Publishing, where he learned about color and things like that. And he decided that he wanted to convey and express the people, the nobility of the people he saw. I see nobility in it. What do you see? And to show what the work that they did and portray that. So by no means a trained artist, what we might call a folk artist, whether he considered himself that or not, but responding to that natural inclination to want to represent and share with the world his viewpoint, his perspective.
I think visual media, whether photography or painting, you know, there's a world of opportunity for how to represent the world around you, but that is certainly not the only way that we hope to capture the changing Chesapeake. Pete, would you like to start us off and talk a little bit about some of the sculptures?
Thank you. I'd be delighted. We certainly are open to three-dimensional works. These are all relatively small three-dimensional works. Certainly, each of these would fit within the 30-inch by 30-inch by 30-inch size limitations. The one at the bottom by Waverly Evans is particularly small. In each of these cases, now the one on the left, the crab picker lady, and the duck hunter at the bottom are both by the same artist. In this case, Waverly Evans of Tylerton on Smith Island, and he was a retired waterman, spent his life as a waterman. But when he got to the point where he physically couldn't do the work out on the water, he was at an age when more tourists were coming to Smith Island and looking for, what do we do out here? And Smith Islanders at the time were sort of wondering, well, why would anybody want to come here? Waverly Evans began creating artworks of the world around him, the world that he knew, his world as a waterman, the seasonal rounds of the waterman, and so the duck hunter down below in his little double-ended skiff. But also what has sustained Smith Island has been crab picking, and the principal occupation on Smith Island and in his village of Tylerton had been crab picking. In fact, Tylerton, the women at Tylerton had founded about this time, a crab meat co-op where they, in order to meet health department regulations, they got together and bought the stainless steel tables and all the rest that they needed to meet the Maryland Health Department's regulations. And so he shows a crab picker doing this work, so often done, of course, by women, most often done by women. He uses an actual, in this case, crab carapace, a very small, too small to be legal size, but it's probably something that washed up. A bottle cap, a soda bottle cap for her pound container that she's picking into, and her body is made of a crab pot buoy. All these found objects. In fact, she's wearing as her necklace also a fossilized shark's tooth. So he's using found objects, the kind of objects that he found in the environment around Smith Island, to create this piece that is both about Smith Island and sort of Smith Island. He loves to incorporate these found objects in his work. Waverly Evans has now passed away. He died in 2015, but he attracted a number of loyal collectors, and now a number of works in his collection that are reflective of this waterman's culture and this changing Chesapeake, this changing culture, this threatened culture that he perceived around him on Smith Island, and which he wanted to memorialize in his art and for sale to visitors to Smith Island. At the top, we have a sculpture by a woman by the name of Mary Only. She has now also passed away, but she never called herself that, or she called herself Mama Girl and signed her work as Mama Girl. And she would use newspaper and glue in a technique that you might have been introduced to, a related technique you might have been introduced to at one point called paper mache. Well, strictly speaking, this is not paper mache, because paper mache is torn. She never tore her paper, but she rolled it, she glued it, she used it in any number of ways. And in this case, she is also making artwork or art reflecting the world around her. In this case, an oyster shucking house. And you see 6 shuckers with their shucking buckets and tools, and oysters piled high on the table. Oyster shucking traditionally done not sitting down like crab picking was done, but standing. She then painted with acrylic paints, and any number of subjects. Always did this work. She saw this. She actually never saw herself as an artist. She saw herself as a prophetess. Always did this work at prayer, with the deeply religious upbringing that she had around her in the Black community on the Lower Eastern Shore of Virginia. So three-dimensional artworks, again, like Waverly Evans, reflective of the culture around the artist that she saw as important, or perhaps changing around her. So three-dimensional works are among those that we'd certainly welcome as submissions in this project.
I would just add, I had the pleasure of meeting Mama Girl a number of years ago and working alongside her. And I hope that in her work, we have some community members who take inspiration and create without the reservation of whether or not you are an artist. I am struck, one of my memories of Mama Girl was that she used the materials that she had in order to create the vision that she had, and really in a true folk art sense, but the passion that she came at the project and the result that she got out of it, I think is really reflective of that spirit, that this is something, this project is intended so that I anticipate that we will have trained artists and people with an art background and a real passion and drive and a self-professed vocation, but also for people that have an idea and just want to experiment. I think Mama Girl really came into her art and found her voice through that experimentation and through that vision. And so I think there's room for all of the perspectives, whether you identify as an artist or you are experimenting with art, even if it's for the first time, there's room for your work in this. So the next pieces that we've put in here, actually one of our attendees today created. So I am excited that we are going to be able to share different techniques and different skill sets of some of our artists in our community as part of this project. So the mosaics that are on here, these are mosaics, but instead of being created of stone or tile with grouting, all of these images were made with cuts of wood, with scraps of wood, and the colors reflect the natural colors of different wood. They're not dyed or painted. And so using the found materials, using the things around us to create images, right? There are many ways that you can approach art making. And Mary Sue Trinellis is going to share her approach to mosaics with us later this spring. So I'm excited for that opportunity in May. And I hope that you'll take an opportunity to engage with us and check out different art styles, because there are just so many opportunities to take what is in your life and what is around you. Mary Sue and Bob had been surrounded by wood. And so taking inspiration from the material that surrounded them to create these visually striking mosaics is hopefully some inspiration that you can take into your project. All right, Jen, let's talk textiles.
Absolutely. Well, so many of us, grew up with sewing and different fiber and textile arts as kind of part of hobby craft and things like that. And it can be obviously taken to a huge level, a very skilled level. We really wanted to use this webinar as an opportunity to showcase some examples from our collection. I wish we had a Baltimore album quilt in our collection. This is an example from the Mariners Museum in Harp in Newport News, Virginia. But the Maryland Center for History and Culture currently actually has a huge exhibition of those on display. Baltimore album quilts came to be in the 1840s. They were very much commemorative pieces, and they were used, they're traditional quilts, but maybe more decorative and less functional. But they all incorporate these beautiful applique designs. Each block, perhaps often done by different people, put together and using themes like patriotism, the buildings, ships, lots of floral motifs, often with these very simple color schemes, which is one of the things that gives them such a bold look. But then presented to a minister, to someone who's getting married. And that tradition continued for a long time. It did decline a bit when machine sewing came to be, and people said, well, why am I going to spend all this time doing hand sewing when I can create quilt blocks and simple geometric patterns, actually sometimes very complex geometric patterns in other ways. But nonetheless, it never really went away. And there's actually been a tremendous revival since the 1980s. The Baltimore Applique Society in particular will reproduce quilts, they'll create new quilts. And so, thinking about all the ways that you can use applique, which, as opposed to geometric types of designs, the sky's kind of the limit, and you could put those together to tell, the metaphors just keep rolling, a woven fabric, combination limit, of course, that could really tell unique stories. And there's all kinds of ways to apply stitching and applique, embroidery, that could be used in this way. And there's plenty of other fiber arts as well that we're not even touching upon here. And we invite you to explore some of those on your own if you're not already practicing them. And Jill, you had one that was quite unique that I'd never heard of before.
Yeah, as we were talking about this, I've been impressed with, and I always enjoy, especially how different science communities reflect data in art. And in the last few years, I've been seeing a lot more of this in textiles. And so the image that I put on the screen to the left is a pattern that I found from an Etsy seller, but it's a project that I think a knitter or crocheter could undertake. It's a visualization of temperature data. So within a span, usually of a year, but it could be several years, taking data, assigning color to it, and then patterning out that spectrum. So a visual representation that you could see in a graph or a chart can also be reflected in textiles and in handicrafts. And so, if you want to go down a really interesting rabbit hole, I think how scientists are reflecting data in textiles is just really fascinating. There's a recent science conference that had a quilting display as part of it, encouraging scientists to show their research through quilting. So, if you are an active scientist and you're doing research, think about how you can show your work, and that may be a visualization that you're working on, or maybe it's an adaptation. And I love the merging of traditional handiwork with data. I just think there are so many opportunities, and I love the creativity that I've been seeing come out of the science community. All right, so we're ending with some creative expression. We've talked a lot about different visual media, but I'm excited by the idea that an exhibition doesn't just have to reflect things that hang on the walls. We'll talk about some other ideas as well, but there are a few other pieces that have come up that I think could serve as some great inspiration. Pete, I can talk about Pete's book, or I don't know if you would rather talk about Pete's book. I'm open to.
You go ahead with with Pete Fortenbaugh's book. Yes.
Okay. So Pete Fortenbaugh is an up and coming author who's spent time living on Tangier Island and just came out with his first novella, which really takes his experiences on Tangier Island and uses it to create a scene, to create a fictional story through the eyes of an 8-year-old boy. And so I put this in, it's definitely, a novella is longer than what I would hope to see for this exhibition. We do have some constraints. And so we're asking for literary work to generally reflect a word length of 500 words to be accessible to our audiences. But what I really loved about reading Pete's book was how he took his experiences living on Tangier and used them as inspiration to create this fictional world that reflected the real world around him. So he's not telling the stories of particular people. I see a lot of nonfiction, and there's certainly a place for nonfiction submissions in this. But what I loved is his approach to taking the lived world and adapting it and really using it as an inspiration for his fiction. And so whether your literature comes out as a poem or a memoir, a short story, I think there's a lot of options for what writing could look like as a submission.
And if you don't mind me weighing in as a literary major, as an undergrad as well, the challenge of creating something within our word parameters, which seems pretty small, is a totally different exercise. So whether it's a scene or it's conveying a feeling, a moment, it can be an interesting exercise. It can be a fascinating way to just in one small piece, a micro essay, a poem, to really capture just one aspect of what inspires you. And then, in your statement, you have the opportunity to say, to show how it does represent one small example of it. So I think there's a great opportunity here for literary submissions from somebody who also writes long works and for whom this would be a big challenge. So I encourage everybody to try to rise to that challenge.
All right, so the last artist that we put into our inspiration slides is a songbook from local folk singer Janie Mcneely. Pete, do you mind talking a little bit about Janie's background?
Janie's done all kinds of things, but she is probably best known around the Chesapeake as the singer-songwriter. Collaborated with some others in a group back in the 80s or 90s known as Crab Alley. And Janie was always she was always on the hunt for the singing tradition, the music traditions of the watermen, of the Chesapeake, and was always frustrated by coming up with so little. There is this rich musical heritage in other maritime areas, but when she came up fairly dry on this search, she said, well, we need to create this. And so she celebrated the bay around her by performing songs of her own composition, and then recently just compiled this into a songbook, typically accompanying herself on guitar, when she was in a group, other instruments as well. But she does love to work and sing with others. She's toured on a number of occasions through this region. I believe was planning on such a tour at the time of when we all shut down, when the performing arts got shut down by the pandemic. But she takes as her subjects the bay that she sees around her, the experience of living in and among watermen, of the work traditions of the Bay that she experienced or observed in her travels around the Chesapeake.
So I've got a song from Janie that I'll play, and then I'd love to take a little time and talk about what else we didn't put into slides, what else we didn't represent, because I think there's so much more in here. But I am excited to share that Janie, who lives in the UK now, is going to be stateside, and she's actually going to perform a concert for us at CBMM in early June. So I hope you look for that information and come out and hear her performance. And as part of our plan to support the Changing Chesapeake exhibition, she's also going to, we're working on finalizing plans for a songwriting workshop. So if you would like to represent your Chesapeake experience through song, Janie is largely self-taught, really a folk artist in the truest sense of the word, but she is really a great mentor for taking your vision and putting it to music. So without further ado, I'm going to play, this is called Sing Me a Song by Janie Mcneely. No. Sing me a song about the October. Sorry, are you hearing the music?
We are hearing it when you are not muted, I believe.
All right, then I will stay unmuted, and I'm gonna back up so we can get her lyrics, because the lyrics are really, I think, reflective of her experience in the Chesapeake. Sing me a song about the October days when the rockfish come barreling straight up the bay, and the waves break a sweat getting out of their way, while the fishermen grin through the morning. Sing me a song about the October breeze when our boat leaves the dock with a bone in her teeth, and the sails against the sky are as white as you please, with the geese flying high across the morning. There's something aloft in an October sky. What's the wind at your back and the spray in your eye? Makes the waves want to dance and your boat want to fly on the wings of an October morning. Sing me a song about the October nights when the stars cut the sky like they're diamonds in flight, and the moon on the marsh grass is burnished and bright, and the winds hunker down till the morning. Our boat swings at anchor in sync with the tide, the smell of the chowders, the sailors' delight, and the waves lap the side with a soft lullaby as we wait for the October morning. There's something aloft in an October sky. Puts the wind at your back and the spray in your eye. Makes the waves want to dance and your boat want to fly on the wings of an October morning. So I will say that we went back and forth about which song to select because we're fortunate that Jamie has such a deep repertoire. And I think there were so many different pieces of inspiration that you could take from this. So she has pieces in her catalog that are more historically focused and more culturally focused. But I picked this song.
And we were doing so well, Pete. I think Jill's going to rejoin us. There you are, Jill.
I'm back.
I was going to say, yes, we had quite the lively debate about which song to include. There's so many, and they do come from a variety of approaches. And, certainly there's some merit to some clearly well-researched, historical pieces in her work that I was attracted to because I'm a historian, but I'm also equally compelled to ones like the one you shared, another called Anthem, where it's the emotional experience of being along the shoreline and engaging with the bay that literally brought tears to my eyes as I was listening to it on the way to work. I've had that feeling. And, that is something I know others struggle to and look for ways to convey. And she's done it so beautifully.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that for me, what made this song stand out in a repertoire that is really reflective and inspired by the Chesapeake was the first person. It was really the personal connection to the experience. And so, in her words, in that first person perspective, describing the environment around her, not once in the song does she say Chesapeake. It doesn't hit you over the head with the Chesapeake, but it is infused in every piece and every verse of the song, from the experience of being on the boat to talking about the animals and the fish around her. It doesn't say Chesapeake and it screams Chesapeake at the same time. And so I put this in. We had some conversation about how to approach, right? How overt do you need to be in your artwork? And because we're asking for the artist statement, if your artwork is reflecting wildlife or a scene that you find particularly compelling, you can use that artist statement to really drive the connection for us if the artwork is not the explicit connection itself. Okay, so we put a lot of different pieces in here that I think hit on artwork that has already been created, but I am excited by what I couldn't find also. And so Jen and Pete, I would love to wrap up by just saying, what do you want to see in the exhibit? What would be exciting to see come in? What kinds of submissions are you hopeful for? And what would knock your socks off? What do you think would just be a fun thing to include?
Well, what I'm hoping is that we do see a rich variety of media, of ways of making art here, and certainly beyond visual art, but thinking of the rich variety that you can of ways in which you can produce visual art, and I would love to see pieces that are reflective of individuals' personal skills and backgrounds and experiences, whether it is, say, welded art, a metal sculpture, or other media that we may not have shown or anticipated here.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, we touched a little bit on found object art with Waverly Evans and his use of simple materials around him. That's always compelling to me, but also, works, whether three-dimensional or relatively, two-dimensional, drawn from nature. And I can, as a gardener and somebody who enjoys being in nature, ways to draw in, you know, the plants and the things we see around us in creative ways to convey what we see evolving or changing, or something that has meaning. Again, thinking of a more of a scientific approach, someone who may do this kind of work in their jobs, and who literally is marking the changes and recording the data, and wants a way to express it. And that's too where things like, you know, something digital. So there's literally art that could be created digitally that looks like a traditional visual art. But if you're not someone who's adept with your hand skills like me, you know, there's ways you can use the computer to convey visually something that compels you. Film. But also, you know, Joey, I know you have a dream of oh, well, you tell us your dream. What's your dream?
So I had fun, right? I've had fun in this process of planning and imagining and putting it together and thinking about what could be. And, you know, I would love to see architecture. What does it look like? What do community plans reflecting climate change? What do those look like? Can we consider them as art? You know, art, I think, can be more than what we sometimes just think of. And so, you know, if you are somebody working with GIS in your job and doing some visualization, you know, there are very artistic interpretations that I think would fit really well. Community planning, landscape design, like there are so many different avenues that we haven't even gotten into, and I think they would be fascinating to see and include as part of this exhibition, especially connecting into climate change and the mitigation strategies that communities are thinking about. But I have said, Jen, as you kind of set me up for, I want to see the video game. What does it look like to reflect the changing Chesapeake in a video game, which, you know, for those of us who maybe aren't avid video game players, video games have come a long way from Atari, and there are some indie designers that are really focused on reflecting landscape, and so, or reflecting narrative through that interactive immersive media. And so just starting to think about what a digital submission looks like, I think the sky is the limit. And I hope, and you know, I'm realistic, I'm probably not going to see a video game as part of this, but man, that would knock my socks off to see somebody that really takes that kind of inspiration and can translate it into something I'm not expecting. So I think that's what I'm excited about. I'm just a huge art lover, and in all different forms. I'm not particularly picky about what it looks like, because in my art, I want to see the artist coming through. And I'm just hopeful that people find inspiration to really reflect themselves and their community in art. So
yeah, I think in short, you know, we want to encourage people to think outside the box and not to discourage them in any way from thinking that they're not the artists that we would want to hear, you know, their message and their voice. So freedom is what we're giving you.
Freedom. And we're also here to support. So again, I'll put the email address back up. You know, if we said something that sparks a thought for you, but you're not sure if it fits, or you have a question, or you have something, but it doesn't quite fit within the size parameters, we want to hear from you. We want to, you know, this is a little bit experimental for us. And we want to hear from you. We want to be able to support you in your process of creating and sharing and reflecting. And so we're here for that conversation as well. So I hope you'll reach out to us. The email address for the exhibition again is changingchesapeake@cbmm.org. And we are really excited for this project to come to fruition. So I'm just very eager to see what the next year brings. I'd love to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. We are going to make the recording available and we will put it on the website for the exhibition. So if you have somebody that you'd like to share the resource with, this will be a standing resource that you can come back to. You can watch this time and time again. And I hope you will consider submitting for the Changing Chesapeake. Submissions are open through September 1st, 2022. And again, we're here to help and talk through any questions you may have as they crop up throughout the next few months. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a great adventure creating your Changing Chesapeake submission.